Hello, White Sox fans, and welcome to another edition of the FutureSox podcast. My name is Ian Eskridge. Joining me this evening is Mr. James Fox. How are you, James?
I am good, sir. What's going on?
Just kind of plodding through the MLB offseason.
Yeah.
It's
Next week will be
interesting.
Next week will be a little interesting because I think it's night one of the winter meetings, right? We'll have a lot to preview. But yeah, getting there. It's crazy. I mean, I love how, what was it? Was it last week or the week before where we said that they wouldn't have any signings and then they signed a guy? So, maybe something will happen.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. So we had another signing. I don't remember who it was off the top of my head.
Cal Mitchell.
There you go.
That one today. I think that was like a prep outfielder that was a Pirate before and then kind of flamed out. But yeah.
Playoff bound.
I saw somebody complaining about it on Twitter and I was like, guys, it's a minor league deal. He's going to be playing in Charlotte.
Well, he is being offered a trip to spring training, so there is that.
But did you see who he will not be playing for in Charlotte? I found that interesting.
Yes, I did. That is something worth talking about here. So if you guys are not aware, earlier today, Daryl Van Schouwen of Sun Times,
Yep.
Dropped some knowledge on us to tell us who is going to be on the coaching staff this year. So not really any surprises unless you thought for some reason that they were going to start cutting and slashing the coaching staff, which I didn't.
Yeah, I kind of thought there might be new first and third base coaches just because I thought he might want to make a couple of hires. But yeah, it seems like Walker McKinven and then an unnamed assistant hitting coach will probably get added, and then who knows? Maybe they'll create a spot for somebody else, like a buddy of his or something. But who knows? But it seems like a lot of the guys are back. Yeah.
So if you guys didn't happen to catch the article, Jason Bourgeois is sticking around to coach first base. Justin Jersley is going to be at third base, he was for the last half of the season or the last bit of the season after Pedro got launched. Grady Sizemore sticking around, and so is Marcus Timms.
Yeah, and then Drew Butera is the catching coach, and then the pitching guys stay the same. Ethan Katz and Matt Wise. So we'll see. I'm sure the director of hitting, Ryan Fuller, will have some influence on the assistant hitting coach, I would imagine. Apparently we're getting that fully announced coaching staff this week, Van Schouwen said.
Yeah. I mean, kind of the way I look at this whole thing is that, they are keeping these guys around, but I have to imagine that if, after a year's time,
oh yeah,
they're not, the numbers don't look good or the working relationship isn't as good for Venable as he had hoped, that, jointly, because they seem to be making all of these decisions with the entire staff as opposed to, just letting, Venable figure out his own thing. Maybe they all, meet together and come up with some sort of decision at that point.
Right, exactly. So, if Jason Bourgeois, isn't out at his post because he's using the restroom too often or something, maybe they decide they need another first base coach. I don't know, who knows. But so I don't know that we were going to get into this, but do you think then Pat Listash, AAA manager, or do you think they hire somebody?
That's a great question. Also Sergio Santos is that's worth true. a thinking thing here,
Yeah.
But I do like Pat Listash. It seemed like, he's got some fire, and I think that his decisions that he made last year when he was managing the club, I didn't feel like he did anything out of the norm or too obnoxious.
Yeah, I just wonder, did he want to manage, or does he just kind of want to be a minor league bench coach at this point? I don't know, maybe I'm sure it's more money, but I don't know. I just kind of thought Pat Listash could have been a minor league manager somewhere if he wanted that job, and he took a bench coach job. So, you never know.
Yeah. I know that Sergio Santos wanted some, at least, some FaceTime with the brass, more or less, for the major league job. I totally did not expect him to get it. I didn't think he had enough major league experience to get that job, but I do like what he did. So, I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening with him, but I would not be shocked to see him in Charlotte.
Yeah, me neither. Me neither. I wonder if I was wondering, like, just looking at like Willie Harris too, like where he ends up, because they really were fans, and he was good in San Francisco briefly too, and he's like not working for the Cubs, and I don't think he's working anywhere. So I don't know if Willie wants to manage in the minors or if he wants to be a base coach in the big leagues again, but I haven't heard anything. I was just curious to see if he was like added back.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious to see what happens with him. I'm happy that he didn't end up here as some sort of nepotism deal. But then again, at this point, it kind of seems like they might possibly be done with that whole thing.
Well, they haven't announced like innocuous jobs yet, like chief of staff, or like we don't even know what Grady Sizemore is going to be doing.
True.
And my guess is it is some sort of like assistant to Will Venable, like do all this extra stuff role. Like he's Will Venable's Mike Tozar, basically. Because, I mean, like, Bourgeois is technically, I think, the outfield coach, but Grady Sizemore was also coaching outfielders. So, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, Grady obviously wants to be here, and they want him here, so it's not a huge deal. But,
yeah.
I like titles. Titles are interesting to me.
Yeah, and I'm up for some creative titles as well. So if they come up with some other interesting, weird title that we've never heard before, I'm totally up for that as well.
Yeah.
Wolf, Vince, good to see you guys. Let's see.
I don't know that answer for Vince.
That is a great question, Vince. What's a base coach make in the big leagues? I would be surprised if it's that much, to be honest.
Yeah,
at least with the White Sox.
It's probably not that much.
And Jack suggests that Grady Sizemore is our right fielder.
Come on, Jack. Only against righties.
Yes. So if you guys didn't happen to catch it, I'm blanking on, I keep on wanting to say Warren Haynes, but it wasn't Warren Haynes, the guitar player from Government Mule and the Allman Brothers.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about the guy that we're supposed to be talking about that I don't remember his stinking name. Gene Watson.
Oh, yeah, Gene Watson. That's right.
He's kind of one of those guys that's been kind of hiding in the background this entire time, and we didn't really know entirely kind of what he did other than it said pro personnel, pro scouting was part of his title. So if you guys didn't catch it, he was on Chuck Garfine's podcast this week. What did you think of that, James? I know you took a look at it.
Well, he seems to be enjoying himself in the gig, at least. So the one thing I heard about Gene Watson, and this was from like a veteran, like Chicago baseball reporter, like at the time, kind of described him as like a good old boy. Like it was kind of like, I think it was like those hires were all made like on the same day. It was like, ooh, Brian Bannister, great hire. This is like unlike anything the White Sox have done. Oh, Josh Barfield, that's really interesting. Like up and coming guy that I don't know much about. Ooh, Gene Watson, like he's been in the league for 25 years in similar roles and he knows everyone, but like that's not always a good thing, right? So like I got kind of the most of that like about Gene Watson, where it was kind of just like like I think people that work for him I think really like him, but there's people around the league that kind of just like aren't huge fans. But I thought he was interesting on that pod. I mean, Chuck like kind of asks like good questions on those, like with some of these like new guys, like and so he's essentially like the head of pro scouting, but the title is like director of player personnel. So like like does Mike Shirley go to him for draft stuff? Like I guess like does the international scouting director go to him? You would think so, like with that title, but it does seem like he basically oversees pro scouting, which look, that means like Chris Getz is relying on him a ton, like when trades are made and those sorts of things, right? And so Chris Getz is kind of put a bunch of guys like in positions that kind of minimize his responsibility, which I think is good, but it's like fun to joke about. but yeah, no. So I think we know Gene Watson. I recommend listening to the pod with Chuck just to kind of hear him a little bit. You know, I think it's a lot of Royals experience, but he's been like a bunch of other places too.
Yeah, so he was with the Padres and the Marlins, won a World Series with the Marlins after they rebuilt. He rebuilt the Padres. They went to the World Series, and then obviously the Royals won the World Series as well while he was there. So he has 2 World Series trophies. One of the things that I found interesting about the conversation is that he's definitely kind of like he's a people person.
Yeah, it does.
He probably knows literally everybody. You know, he goes to the GM meetings or the winter meetings, and he literally knows every single person at the place. Whether they like him, I can't say. But he seems like a fairly, decent guy on surface level, at least.
Yeah, it seems like he could make like a phone call to every, like, oh, I know a guy there, and like you just like send a text when you're trying to, hey, do you think you guys would be interested in this? I think like everybody kind of needs that guy, right? And then the other thing that I thought was funny was when he said they have 7 pro scouts, and I was trying to like figure out who they were. I was like, do they still? So maybe they hired some. So I had heard that Josh Barfield was overseeing this, like where, obviously they wanted to do the international department and they hired a hitting director and this and that, right? But I had heard that Josh Barfield was like going to revamp the pro scouting department with new hires. We haven't heard about any of that. And I didn't go to like the media guide to count, how many pro scouts they had before minus how many they fired to get to 7. But apparently they have 7.
Yeah, I think they fired 5 of the pro scouts. Does that sound about right?
It might only be 4, but yeah, and some guys do both. Like they send guys out on special. Like Nick Hostetler is there still, but he's like special assistant to the general manager. So, like I'm pretty sure they send him out. Like just whatever. Like, hey, the Phillies are interested in Garrett Crochet, like go watch the Phillies for a week, like these places, that type of thing. Because I think that's a misconception with like pro scouts. Like a lot of people kind of think like pro scouts are just like advanced scouting for your next series, but they're not. They're scouting like the minors for trades too. So you kind of need a bunch of these guys.
Yeah. So here's one of the things that I wanted to talk about here from Joshua. Watson had the best explanation of the Fetty trade that Albertus and Perez are first and second rounders plus Vargas, but the trade was still a piece short considering the numbers of players they gave up.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't say that last part.
That part I don't remember hearing, but he did mention that he had wanted to grab Vargas before, and he had been in contact with them trying to grab them, and obviously. What we saw from Vargas with the White Sox last season is not what you wanted to see. But he put up some big numbers in AAA beforehand. I feel like we haven't seen the best of what Vargas can do for sure.
Well, the thing was like that was the Pacific Coast League, right? Or it was AAA. What are they? AAA Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Look, like I understand being skeptical of those numbers when it's just like this giant power guy, but like his was all like on base percentage related, most of it anyways, right? So like I would like to think a guy that walked that much in the minors isn't this awful. I'm hoping it's a lot like how Corey Lee was, right? Like Corey Lee looked unplayable. People wanted to cut him. And then look, he's not great. He's a backup catcher, but he was okay last year. Like he'll be in the big leagues for a long time, like as a offensive minded backup. Like they have to salvage Vargas. It's one of the reasons why you hire a guy like a Ryan Fuller to like see what you can get out of this guy. Like, where does he play? I don't know. Do I wish the headliner was better? Yeah, absolutely. But I think the 2 things we said the day of that trade when everybody was killing it and we tried not to, right? Just because like I didn't want to be the same as everybody else was that it was definitely a player short. For sure. Like I still believe that. Like if that deal was, Vargas and those 2 guys and then somebody else that we like, it's like, okay, fine. And the other thing is the White Sox really like Gerald Perez and Albertus. And we didn't see Albertus play. There's mixed reviews on him and, like what it means for the bat if he has to stay at third. But there's also people that really think he's awesome. So they clearly like those two guys, like a lot. So that was kind of the deal. I hated the Kopech part of the deal, obviously. Like that made the whole thing worse. And teams were clearly not huge on Fetty's like peripherals and the lack of strikeouts, I feel like. So that's how you end up with the deal that you ended up with. But I do think the Perez and Albertus portion of this is pretty interesting.
So Jack brings up Albertus had leg surgery a couple weeks back, and it did look
yeah, that was gross.
Yeah, it did look pretty nasty. Well, so we'll see.
Well, he did say, was he the one that said that it doesn't change the timeline, or did I see that somewhere else?
I think it was somebody else that said it. I do remember seeing it, but I mean, it could have been him. I don't know.
So they still anticipate like that he'll be ready like for spring training, basically, like regardless of what his leg looks like. They had to go in and like fix something that they did, and I don't know. It was nasty though.
I mean, the scars are going to be nasty anyway.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Uncle Ted says, "Give me an outfield of the Martian, Spencer Jones, and Owen Casey smashing righty nukes."
It was Fegan, Josh. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
This is so we've seen that.
This is good from Tom too. Sorry.
Tom Skelton says Vargas' hand movement in his swing makes no sense. His hands start in the middle, go up, then come back down before he swings. I think he can catch up to velocity more if he calms his hands down.
Yeah,
I think that'll definitely be something they work on.
And they hired like a swing decision guy, which was, because like I don't know, like Ian, like yeah, nobody's gonna accuse me of like watching White Sox September baseball games last year, but I didn't think that he was just going up there like hacking. He kind of did have somewhat of a plan, but like the swing was terrible. I mean, he was just awful. Like the swing was terrible. Like everybody on that team was awful.
Well, I mean, do you think that it had something to do with the fact that he probably didn't have the data that he's used to having?
Well, probably, maybe. They said like, oh, this guy likes to throw it down in the zone. Good luck, kid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
if you see a slider, don't swing.
Yeah. Right. Which I think some of that stuff is changing. Because we can get into Chris Getz more at some point, but for all the shortcomings, I think he might. He might be the only guy we've ever seen here that knows how to whisper sweet nothings in Jerry's ear and gets what he wants. So now, maybe not on the player side, right? But he's like, hey, we have to fix this org and we're doing it now.
Yeah. So I will admit this out front. I had no idea that Gene Watson was around for the Padres and the Marlins rebuilds as well.
Yeah, he's old.
Fair enough.
I don't know what the role was. Do you remember? So he's run scouting departments before, but I'm guessing then he was just like in the room.
Yeah, I think he was pro player when he got to the Royals. I think he was heads like the director of scouting with the Marlins. But I mean, regardless of that, like what the title was, is that he was in the room for that, and that kind of, to me, speaks pretty well. And like we know that we like Mike Shirley, and a bunch of the scouts have pulled some pretty good names in the final couple of years, last couple of years. So that kind of gives me like some something positive to look at when it comes to what we're looking at here with the personnel that they're going to bring in.
Yeah. Pull up that from Beef Loaf. So
yeah.
So this is kind of what Ian was alluding to, but no, like Beef, that 100%. I mean, he is the GM meeting, winter meeting, owners meetings guy. Like he's the White Sox representative down in the hotel bar. Like, he's definitely done the trade talks on a napkin thing that everybody talks about, like he's just not in charge. Right. But now he might have enough influence to get his general manager to actually make one of those trades.
I will bring this up as well, is that Hostetler is still here.
Yeah,
so
I think
different role. But
I think Nick Hostetler gets a bad rap personally, but
probably.
I mean, I think it was funny that Nick Hostetler would like come on with me for 40 minutes and like wax poetic about high school players and then draft 39 college guys. Like Like it is kind of what it is.
Yeah, I can't say that was all him. And that's kind of what I said the entire time, is that I didn't know who to blame about that whole thing. It was like basically the same thing about the White Sox in general, is that you never knew who to blame about what, So I know that that Hostetler was always very, personable to every person that I know that's talked to him. Everybody liked him a lot. So
yeah, you just hear all the stories, and we've talked about the draft stories, and like I don't know who he likes, I don't know who Kenny likes, I don't know who's making picks. What like look, the picks are on his resume, right? Like those 4 drafts are his. And he would tell you that, right? Like his biggest thing is he doesn't like being blamed for the Carson Fulmer pick because the guy right before him made his final first round selection that year and took Fulmer, and then Hostetler basically took over the rest of that draft. So he's always like, you can blame Zach Collins on me if you want, but I'm not taking the blame for Carson Fulmer. Like, it's kind of like pretty funny. But
hey, well, Carson Fulmer's still in the league. I can't say that for Zach Collins.
No, Zach Collins, what is he doing?
He's a real estate agent or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He's selling houses. Yeah.
I mean,
video games
got to
and
make
houses.
him.
Do you remember anything else like eye-opening? Because, I actually did last week I pulled a beef loaf on one of the cold days, and I walked around my neighborhood. That was the day that I listened to that interview, actually. And it was pretty, I don't know. I remember, thinking that it was interesting at the time, but now I'm trying to think back to there was some stuff on Edgar Carroll, right? He was with the Angels when they signed him. That was another weird thing for Gene Watson, was that he was like a Royal for a long time and then left and went to the Angels and then went back to the Royals and then came to the White Sox, basically.
Yeah, I kind of had the feeling that he was kind of over his role in KC.
Yeah.
And, he did say that he made the decision to move to the White Sox after walking the concourse and loved the energy of the fans. So that's why he came to the White Sox.
Did he come during a Cubs game?
I mean, there would have been lots of fist fights.
Yeah, and I do know that when J.J. Piccolo took over the Royals, he did bring in he did a lot of very similar stuff to like what Getz is doing right now. Manager from the outside, multiple like scouting directors from the outside. Like the Royals are kind of a really different org than the one that Gene Watson worked in previously. So maybe he was like on the outs anyway and Getz saved him. And look, I'm sure Gene Watson knows Tony because I think they were in LA together, and a lot of these coaches were in LA at the same time Gene Watson was there. So there's a lot of links and stuff here, but he's essentially like your director of scouting. So we'll know what Gene Watson thinks of some of these players, like once the White Sox start making trades.
Yeah. And, that's probably coming up pretty soon. I have to imagine. Question from Uncle Ted. Do you think they rush Schultz up this year if they trade Crochet?
I don't think so. I think rush is the wrong word. So I actually had this conversation with a beat writer who was like just kind of like asked, because I said that Schultz is going to throw like 140 innings, and this particular person said like they thought that was high, and like I don't like. I would be really surprised because he threw like 90 last year after throwing 27. So like I feel like 50 more innings is a natural progression. Like if he's ever gonna like start in the majors, like I just like don't think that's that crazy. So I think it kind of depends on like how many do you want him to have in the minors, and do you start him in Birmingham or not? Because the problem that you're gonna have is if you send him to Charlotte and he's unbelievable there. Like, what are you doing? Like you just leave him there like all year? Like when there's going to be like all the hand wringing of just like pitch this guy in Chicago. Like, what are you doing type of thing. So that's one of the storylines for the start of the minor league season that I'm already kind of like looking forward to. Is just seeing where Noah Schultz like starts next year.
Yeah. My question is if you think 140 innings is too much, the only way I don't see him hitting 140 innings is if he runs into like command issues and has escalated pitch counts.
Yeah, or if they do the thing where he's only starting once a week, because like that could derail it too a little bit. Because even if like you decide that like the number is going to be 6 innings, right, and it's one start a week, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I still feel like that's kind of well over what he well over what he pitched last year.
Well, yeah. I mean, if he's getting like 6 innings,
Yeah, 30,
and
30 starts. I mean,
yeah, I
you're
mean
between 150 and 180. Like,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
And I mean, I obviously don't expect him to hit 6 innings every single time he goes out, because he's going to have those times. Unfortunately, it is predictable that there are going to be blow up games
yeah.
where he's going to have some tough innings, and he has to figure out how to work through it to get him to where you want him to be. So,
yeah. And I don't know that this front office is necessarily going to rush anybody, but I do think the pitchers are different than the hitters, right? Like, I think you and I have both kind of been pretty cautious, like in talking about Montgomery and talking about Caro, like, because like you don't want to bring hitters up too soon. But I mean, if Hagen Smith and Noah Schultz are dominating the high minors, like they could just pitch in Chicago. Like the only reason to keep them down would be for like service time reasons. Cause like with pitchers, like they're either ready or they're not. Like they're just going to come up and their stuff's going to be the same. So, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw both those guys.
yeah. Something else interesting is that Watson did say that he was down watching Hagen Smith and talking to his manager, his agent.
Yeah, the agent, yes.
And, talking about signability and all that stuff while he was down there, and kind of transferred that whole thing over to Shirley and company, and then they got that deal done. So
yeah, he's got a good agent. He got $8 million with a slot of 7-7. So, which we weren't expecting. And I do think, like in hindsight now, looking back on that whole thing, you can tell me what you think about this. So I haven't heard this, but like this. So my theory is that Mike Shirley really was trying to play bonus pool games and like getting the best draft class possible. And he felt like, as a scouting director, like, here's this option. Like we can get this guy for this price and then we can get the rest of these guys later, that sort of thing. But I think he had said that Hagen Smith was like his top player and a lot of their top people's top player. Right. And then the general manager's like, well, if that's the top guy, we're taking him and paying him, because like Chris Getz had to hit on that draft pick. Right. And if it's one of these things where it's like, okay, Jack Caglione has all these questions, like you're going to medical red flag JJ Weatherholt, like just take this lefty that we can develop into an ace and just whatever. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
Yeah. And a former White Sox player won Cy Young Award, and, got both Comeback Player of the Year awards as well. So
has anybody
that's one thing.
Has anybody traded more aces than the White Sox have? The Pirates, maybe? Like, yeah.
Maybe the Phillies.
Yeah. Like
Astros have.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, the Tigers. 100%. Scherzer,
Verlander.
Yeah. Let's see here. So I did see this from Wolf Larson. Wolf asks, is Ramos playing winter ball? I'd love to see him take charge at third. We need some position players to pop. I did look through the entire Lidom League, and I did not see his name anywhere. I can't say. I don't think I've seen him on any of the rosters. Thank you, Uncle Ted. Appreciate that.
I know Sosa was playing. And playing well too. Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see like if there's a plan for Ramos, or if it's just like roll a bunch of these guys out and let them compete in the spring. Like, do they want him to be the third baseman? Do they want Vargas to be the third? You know what? I just don't really know, because you have like all these kind of corner profiles. Obviously, you do have like a DH spot open as of now. You have Andrew Vaughn on the team at first, obviously, but like Gavin Sheets is gone, so. You technically have a spot for guys to play. But yeah, it would be nice if Ramos could be a regular. That would be very helpful.
Yeah, that would be nice to get a position player that comes up and develops into a stud. We'll see what comes of that.
Yeah,
so
that's one of the ways they could. Sorry, one of the.
You're good.
we talked about that. Like, what's a successful season next year? If you have a couple position players that you really like going forward, I think that's a good start because I think you're going to have pitchers.
Yeah, see, that's this actually ties in very nicely. I feel like the White Sox have a ton of pitching, but you just put out an article on FutureSox.net on the Rule 5 and the possibilities for the White Sox with the first pick in the Rule 5 draft. You want to go ahead and give a little run on that?
Yeah, I highlighted 10 players. So they have the number 1 pick. I mean, look, it's easier to keep pitchers. It really is. And I think there's a couple of guys that I highlighted that if they took them, I'd be like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, even if it's a guy with starter traits, you could like likely hide them in the bullpen. Like, think back to, obviously Dylan Covey wasn't great, but there were some solid moments. I think he's still pitching on a team, which is crazy. And look, some guys take position players. Anthony Santander worked out, that sort of thing. But like a lot of guys just aren't ready. And the fact of the matter is you have to keep them on your team all year, which makes it difficult. So like if you made me guess, my guess would be they take like a pitcher and, just because they could stash a guy. But there are a couple. Sleepy Harold, brought up Christian Franklin of the Cubs. I highlighted in my piece there. So he was a 4th-round pick out of Arkansas a few years back, 25 years old. You probably saw him a bunch, Ian, playing for the Smokies.
In person.
Yeah, so contact skills, on-base ability, raw power. But, so he hits the ball really hard, but he only hit 5 homers, but he can play center field. So, he's a right-handed hitter. I don't know that the White Sox want to add another right-handed hitting outfielder. Like, could they keep him on the team all year? I don't know, right? If you think he's the best guy with the most upside, do you just take him and let him battle it out in spring? Maybe, who knows? So, but it does seem like he's kind of been highlighted a little bit at Baseball America. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody took him. I don't know that it'll be the White Sox necessarily. But I don't know if you looked it over. Like, do you like a plan? Is there a plan for you? Like, what do you think makes sense?
I mean, I think that the Christian Franklin thing makes sense to me. If you look at the way his plate approach is, makes smart decisions in the box, short, quick swing, without a lot of movement, and he's got natural power. I mean, it's not going to be one of those swings that's going to necessarily, once again, it's not going to necessarily hit the ball over the fence. But, you're at least looking at a decent slugging number because he's going to get a lot of base hits because he hits hard line drives and lots of barrel contact.
Yeah, for sure. Because then even, I didn't put a ton of position players on there, but Bob Seymour he's a Mount Carmel kid. He's not a kid anymore. He's 26, but, he's out of Wake Forest. He's just your typical, like, first base DH, lefty masher. He struck out 30% of the time at Triple. Did you see him at all at Durham?
I mean, I saw him when the Sox prospects were pitch against him. I mean,
or like when the Knights played him. So yeah, he hit 28 homers last year across AA and AAA. Like, could he come in and like be a Sheets replacement? I guess so. Like, are you going to use the first overall pick in the Rule 5 on that guy though? Like, I really don't know. I included AJ Vukovich because they liked him. He played at East Troy, like Wisconsin, so he's a Midwest prep guy. He was a 4th rounder back in 21 of the Diamondbacks, so Josh Barfield's familiar. That would kind of surprise me. I mean, I included him on this list, like, kind of just because of those ties. And then Ryan Ward is similar in the same vein as like a Seymour, where he's a first baseman for the Dodgers that they're very familiar with. I think he's got like 115 minor league homers, which is weird because his exit velocities aren't great. I read at Baseball America that he like didn't hit a ball over 110 like all year, and he's got a ton of homers. So, if they go on the position player side, like, I think outfield or first base DH makes some sense, but there's a lot of pitching options.
Yeah. Shout out to East Troy, Wisconsin, home of Alpine Valley.
Yes. It's a good
lovely place to go see a concert.
Yeah. No, it's good.
Yeah, my whole thing that I'm hoping for this Rule 5 is I don't want to see another Shane Drohan type pick. Like that's the only issue I have, unless they really have confidence in, like, say, Griff McGarry.
Yeah, that's my high upside one, man. Like, and that's a Brian Bannister thing. Like, it's what do you think, Brian? Like, can you fix the command? Because if you can, this guy's a closer. He is nasty. He was good in the Arizona Fall League, but he just has never commanded in his entire life.
Yeah, it's scary. I mean, like he's got like huge upside. My one worry here is that we already have a ton of pitching, and if you can grab somebody like a Franklin, and it was asked by Vince here if Christian Franklin is Harrison Bader. I mean, I mean, at this point, like that would be one of the top White Sox prospects if Harrison Bader was in the system.
Right.
So I mean, I can't necessarily say that. I feel personally like he's probably got a little bit more consistent power and possibly a better ability in the strike zone, but I can't say that for sure.
Yeah. So Griff McGarry last year at Charlotte, last year in AAA, 30.2 innings, 4.70 ERA, 40 Ks, 36 walks. Like, it's just, he's averaged 6.1 walks per 9 in his minor league career. Now, Gene Watson, as you were talking about earlier, said that he had coverage in the Arizona Fall League, correct? So, I mean, McGarry was pretty good out there. It's obviously a small sample. The pitching sucks. But his stuff is probably significantly better than most of the guys that were pitching out there. So, anybody can be good for a couple of weeks, right? So, I thought that Brian Magdaleno is a southpaw from Texas. He's like kind of a funky, low slot, hard throwing lefty type guy. Like, I thought that one was interesting. There were like a couple of starters I put on this list. Alex Pham is a top 30 prospect for the Orioles. Ryan Webb is definitely going to get taken. He's a 25-year-old lefty starter for the Guardians. Their typical, Guardian playbook. It's a fourth rounder a few years back out of Georgia that had Tommy John. It's just a low 90s fastball. He commands everything. So, he'll definitely get taken and be pitching somewhere. For me, I have no information. Like, I've heard nothing. I haven't reached out to anybody on this. To me, the leader in the clubhouse is Shane Smith, the right-handed pitcher for the Brewers. I just like think it makes sense. 6'4", 235-pound righty that has experience starting and relieving. He made 16 starts for AA with a 3.08 ERA. He struck out 106 batters last year and walked just 26 in 88 innings. And his fastball like gets up to 98. I just think that's a guy where, if you converted him to relief, the stuff really plays up. And then there's no reason that he can't start later or start some, but it just seems like a pretty high upside arm. Shane Smith of the Brewers. If you made me guess, like, who do they take with the number 1 pick, I would guess him.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Just so much pitching in the system already. And I totally understand the ability to be able to stash somebody like that on your 26 man and get away with it. I guess just my feeling is that I would rather go for broke and try and find somebody that's going to be a useful everyday player and give them back if it doesn't work out.
So do you want Christian Franklin?
I kind of think so. Like, I mean, I enjoy the absurdity of watching what's his name on the Rays, the first baseman.
Oh,
like
the way he plays.
He's just he's a kind of a caricature of what you think of a first baseman. It's just no speed, no lateral quickness at all. He just hits the ball hard, and he's a big boy.
Rob Seymour, yes.
Yeah. Just watching him run around the bases, it's funny. Yeah. And he has crazy power. It's just how much is he going to miss the ball?
Right.
And I don't know if you're going to, necessarily take that pick with the first pick of the Rule 5 draft. Maybe later, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, like if I were them, I would try to make 2 picks or multiple picks, because every year there's like a team at the top that like has a full roster, doesn't feel like taking a guy. Like just trade for a guy. Like who cares? Like it's fine. Like they have so many roster spots, right? Like
yeah, they got three, right? They're at 37.
Yeah, and you can always make space like that day. Like there's plenty of guys they can get rid of. So if you've identified 2 guys, like, you want to take like a high upside reliever I think you go to Brian Bannister and you let him pick a guy, and you go to Ryan Fuller and you let him pick a guy. You're like, all right, we're taking 2 guys.
Fair enough.
Yes.
That's a interesting strategy. I mean, there might be somebody in the Orioles system that he has a particular liking for that he might want to grab. I don't know.
Well, and I do think in years past, and like it's the Rule 5 draft, it's not a huge deal, but I do think the number 1 pick kind of leaks, like where they're like, this guy's expected to be the top pick in the rule, because like it was like that for Ryan Noda for sure 2 years ago with the A's, and then they took Mitch Spence too, I think last year, or number 1, and he was like a starter for them all year. He was in their rotation. That's where. So I was reading Baseball America, and they said this Ryan Webb, who's like the lefty for Cleveland, is basically like this year's Mitch Spence. Like if one of those teams up there takes him, they can just make him their 5th starter and he can just be in the rotation all year. Now, does that make sense for the White Sox when you have as much pitching as they have? Maybe not, right? But if you're Colorado or somebody that needs a guy, like, that's why they said they'd guarantee that guy gets taken, basically. And Cleveland just doesn't have enough roster spots, to protect everyone. So they get poached quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they let the guy go back to the Diamondbacks last year, and he goes
Davis
and hits.
De Los Santos, right?
Yeah, he ends up hitting 40 home runs just because they don't have a roster spot.
Well, then you turn him into AJ Puck, which is like a great trade for the Diamondbacks.
Yep. All right, so I want to move on from that.
Clemente, ooh, I don't know. Probably.
Let's see here. Is Roberto Clemente the best Rule 5 ever?
I mean, if he's a Rule 5 pick, probably.
He was,
Josh Hamilton's up there too, though.
Josh Hamilton's up there.
A really, really good one.
Johan Santana was another really good one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some really solid ones for sure.
So I was pretty young. Like I don't remember when Josh Hamilton was like a phenom and went number 1 overall, and then obviously he had all the issues. But then after that, like when Cincinnati, like where he got right, for the most part, and then Cincinnati like traded for him, and then all of a sudden he was just awesome. Like, and then he went on his like 7 or 8 year run of just being an absolute stud.
Yeah.
But I guess I didn't realize until later the first part, right? Like the phenom that he was coming up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Dan Ugla erasure.
Yeah, he was one too.
Oh, we'd never do that, Sleepy. We'd never.
I think one of the best recent ones though is Anthony Santander.
Yeah, no, that's another great one. Yep, for sure. So I wanted to move along here a little bit. One of the things that's obviously been going around is trade rumors, and we've heard some interesting stuff about Garrett Crochet. Do you have any thoughts on anything in particular?
Well, so there's some stuff out there that I hope they don't do, basically. That's all I really wanted to, like, I don't think we're going to hate the Garrett Crochet return if it's just Garrett Crochet, just because, like, I think, like, I don't know. Like, I think they're going to get enough, like, if they pull the trigger, right? But they better not attach Andrew Benintendi to them. Like, if they do something like that, like, I'm going to hate it, like, right away. So I guess those are, like, my couple things are, like, do not attach Andrew Benintendi to him to like, get rid of that contract, because that would be a terrible idea. And I really don't love some of what's out there on Robert, just because, like they should be asking for a lot for Luis Robert. But there's also, like, stuff out there where, like they feel like the option is expensive potentially the year after, like if he's bad again. So I just hope that he hasn't soured on them enough to where they just kind of dump Robert to get like a couple of pieces and then save the money. Like, I really think you should let him try to rebound in the first half and then trade him. Like, if you're not going to get a ton, because they should ask for a ton. But I mean, look, I think they're going to be involved in trade talks. I don't know what an Andrew Benintendi deal looks like potentially, because I do think you'd have to take something back. I would be in favor of trading Benintendi for like a Taiwan Walker to stick in your rotation, and then you could play young guys instead. Like something like that is fine for me. I don't know that the White Sox have any interest in doing something like that.
Yeah, the main thing that I am thinking about is trying to figure out what the White Sox think Robert is worth. Because we saw the season that he had last year, and I'm not saying that that's going to be a normal thing for him, and I kind of feel like they feel that Fuller's going to help him quite a bit and help rein him in a little bit and kind of give him a little bit more of a sense of direction and some data that helps him figure out where he's most powerful at and what he's supposed to be swinging at and what he should absolutely not even entertain. And if they think that that's going to be a thing, does that mean that they bump him back to the trade deadline if he's having a monster first half? Possibly. But, I mean, it could also be one of those things where they just, let him run and see what happens,
Yeah, because the thing, so I will say, like, I've heard a lot about the White Sox having interest in Gavin Lux, like, dating all the way back to him being in high school. And I think he only has, like, 2 years of control, right? So if you wanted to trade, like, a couple of minor league pitchers or something and take a chance on Gavin Lux, like, okay, fine. Like, you want Gavin Lux on your team, like, you have runway for him for 2 years, like, cool, right? I just, like, when I start hearing stuff like that, like, oh, they really like Gavin Lux, like, from multiple people, and, like, the Dodgers don't have a spot for him, like, it makes me just fear that it's like a Luis Roberts sell low type of situation where it's like Gavin Lux and a couple more like rookie ball prospects, and like you just like trade Robert because you don't trust him type of thing. And I just like hope that that's not like, I want to see Robert in the first half. Like, I want to see it. Now, I understand there's some risk there, right? Like, you bring Luis Robert back and he sucks again or he's hurt, then you have a decision to make on a $20 million option, which, look, it's very easy for you or I to be like, oh, pick it up. But, you know what I mean? So you don't want to get nothing for this guy. So I get both sides, but I also don't want to just like sell him low to dump the money and save Jerry. So.
Yeah, if I was going to make an answer, my answer would definitely not be dependent on Jerry's money.
Right, exactly. But if you're Chris Getz and you know, like, well, there's no way he's going to let me pick this up if he's bad again, do you make an okay deal now instead of a great deal at the deadline? I don't know. Like, I hope not, but I just, there's a lot that wouldn't surprise me, basically.
Interesting volley from Uncle Ted. Why trade for Lux when you can literally sign the same player for nothing in Brendan Rodgers?
Well, there is that because the scouting people always go back to these guys that they fell in love with when they were in high school. So we talked earlier about Vukovich, right? Like Gavin Lux, same thing. Wisconsin prep kid that I thought they were going to take like when they took Zach Collins. And they didn't. They took Zach Collins instead. And, so like it's gone all the way back to there. Gavin Lux hasn't been great, but I mean, like Dodgers guys are weird because they don't play all the time. So, if you can get Gavin Lux for, whatever, pick a couple of minor league pitchers from the system, like, fine. Because they're going to trade some of these pitchers, like to, get some stuff. But, and then the other thing that's out there is like the Alec Baum thing. What are your thoughts on that? Because that doesn't make any sense to me.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So, like, to me, if there's some sort of, like, three-way trade where, like, Alec Baum goes elsewhere and it nets you, like, a prospect from somebody, okay, fine. Like, that I get, but I don't get taking him back as part of the package. You already have 2 third basemen, like, that you want to see. I don't know that he can stay at third. He was bad till, like, in the second half last year, and he only has 2 years of control.
Touche.
But doesn't make any, But are the guys who were in love with Lux still here? Yeah, they were. One of them is, we talked about one of them earlier. But,
fair enough.
Yeah. For a while. No, but I do think, like, look, a lot of these rumors are out there, and I do like this week. So John Paul Morosi I feel like a lot of people don't like because he gets a lot of stuff wrong because he just kind of, it feels like he just kind of tweets everything he hears.
Arson Judge.
Yeah. You're like, wasn't that Heyman?
I don't know. They all kind of mesh together.
Morosi was the one who said that Shohei Ohtani was on a plane to Toronto. Bad.
Yes.
Yeah. But I will say, like, I know for a fact that he's had like a long-standing relationship with Getz. From like he's got a lot of Michigan ties, basically. And he basically said like all this talk about these like young veterans on the Red Sox doesn't make any sense because the White Sox want guys with more control than that because they're far away. Which great, John, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. You know, he also brought up like the Philly part, how Philly was floating bomb, and the White Sox are like, no, we're not going to do that because that doesn't make any sense. So that's what I like to hear. I think it's. You know, I had heard that if they have their way, it's two pretty impact position players at the top of whatever this package is, and then a couple more things. So does that limit the teams you're trading with? I don't know. But, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a winter meetings discussion or if we're on next Sunday and then have to pop on Tuesday night as well to talk about the Garrett Crochet return. So
that is entirely possible. It might be one of those unexpected pop-on streams. We'll see. So before we end this show with, whatever questions you guys have in the chat, I wanted to mention Soxfest because we didn't talk about it at all last week. And I wanted to get your thoughts. They have scheduled it for the Ramova Theater, which is a much smaller venue than we are used to having it as fans. It is a much more segmented and just like a divided crowd setup with less ability for features than say like a McCormick Place or something like that. What are your thoughts on the location for the new Soxfest setup?
Well, so I do think it's funny that like the owner doesn't want to be on the south side, and Sheena Quinn has like been going around like talking about how they like, they really wanted to move this event to the south side, like because they're like the south side team. I think it's cool. I think the Ramova Theater's cool. I do think like this format is cooler, like for someone like me. So like when I would go to Soxfest in the past, I go to the panels because I think the panels are interesting, right? Like I want to hear, and I think it was at the time, like the last time we went was at McCormick Place, and it was like massive and it was like way too big. But, you know, I heard like a thing with Chris Getz and Jeremy Haber on the minor leagues. And then, you know, there was like Mike Shirley talked, and I got to walk up after and like I introduced myself to Mike and talked to him for 5 minutes. Like I would much rather, like I don't care about autographs, and I kind of despise like, you know, like adult autograph seekers that are weird. Like it's kind of just strange. Like it's a kid's thing, right? So like I understand like the people that are upset about like, you can't wait in line for autographs anymore, really. But like that's not why I ever went. Like I don't care about that. So I think this is cooler. But yeah, like I get it. I understand the people that think like, you know, you're like hiding or whatever, you know. But I do think like Getz and Venable and these guys are going to sit up there at the theater and they're going to go through their spiel, and then they're going to take questions from the crowd, and you're going to be able to ask whatever you want. And if you get satisfactory answers, like I don't know that, but you know, I think they're going to be out there. But yeah, it's not like the stay in the hotel, kids crawling everywhere, like people waiting in autograph lines for Michael. It's not going to be that anymore.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they'll have like a little bit more of a feel of like the Sox prom type deal, you know, that kind of autograph session, you know, where like, when me and Danny went to the 108 Sox machine thing up in the one room that they have. And I assume that that's probably where they're going to have like their Q&As possibly, like the small, like if they have smaller stuff, or where they're going to do the meetings where, you know, they're just going to have a couple of players and a couple of prospects just hanging out in the room, and, you know, a certain amount of people are allowed in the room at any given time, and they can go and, get an autograph or get a picture with their favorite players, whatever. I kind of feel that that's probably how they're going to work it. The thing that I have yet to work out is exactly how they're going to do concessions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I
Because
think
it's like
they mentioned it. Yeah.
it's pretty separated, and like they've got like this diner downstairs, like that's got like a diner counter with like all sorts of different craft beers and stuff, and then yeah, I don't know. I want to see it in action
Yeah.
before like.
I think isn't there outdoor space though? And I know it's going to be cold, but like I think they're because Sheena Quinn was on with the CHGO guys, and I listened to it. But now I'm not quite remembering. But she did bring up something where it's like, you might be able to like go out and get food outside, and then like talk to Harold Baines or something. Like that was kind of. Yeah.
Is he flipping burgers outside?
I don't know, but there will be like food items, and you're not all relegated to the 1,500 seat theater, like I kind of feel like. So I think it'll be interesting when we see like the event schedule, because I do think it's like 2 nights, like 5 hours each. Like it's not.
I thought it was less than that.
Is it? Okay, yeah.
Oh, maybe it is like 4 to 9, or maybe it's 5 to 9. I think it's 5 to 9, like 4 hours a night.
Yeah, so I bet it's like. Here's your 2005 panel with these 5 guys moderated by Ozzy. And then here's your panel with Mike Shirley and Chris Getz. And then here's your manager. Like, that's what it's going to be. It's going to be that sort of thing, which I actually would kind of be interested in.
So from Vince here, he says, it would never happen, but can you imagine the response from fans if Uncle Jerry attended?
Yeah, so a lot of people are saying that they don't expect him to be there. Didn't he used to go to Soxfest or no?
He has made appearances there. I think I went in. It's been a long time since I went, but I think he was there when I went.
So I was at the last 2 Soxfests. So the one in 2019 was still at the Hilton, the Palmer House, I believe, or the
Chicago, that's where I went. The last one I went
Hilton.
To. Yeah,
because that was like when they were still in the mix for Machado and Harper. And then the next year was when they moved to McCormick Place, and it was like too big. It was like huge.
Yeah, I did not like that idea.
And then they haven't had one since. So, yeah, I'm very curious. And look, they're going to talk about the 05 team, and it's the 125th anniversary of the White Sox. So I think there's enough to deviate from the fact that like this team's going to be really bad. But I do think for the purposes of like what we do and with some of our listeners, like they're going to have a lot of prospects at this thing. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Colson Montgomery and Noah Schultz and like a lot of these kids are there, so.
Yeah, so they're from Howard, 5 to 9 for 2 nights. Admission is $56 plus, about $20 in fees. So, like one of the things regarding Vince's question about Uncle Jerry, this is one of the things that you and I had talked about, James, was how the White Sox were going to, because we knew that it would have to be done from their perspective, especially about Jerry's idea of controlling the narrative about everything with the White Sox, is that they would have to figure out a way to kind of steer the event and keep things positive for the White Sox and not allow a lot of the negativity in. And to me, it seems like the way that they're planning on doing things with a almost like, like a concert setup where they've got like a big stage and then they've got the crowd out there and microphones. So everything's kind of separated there, and it allows them to kind of control where things are going to go there. And it seems to me that this is like a way of doing just that.
Yeah, I think definitely. And I also think like, I don't know, like, do you think angry people are going to pay that money to go there and yell at them? I just don't think so. Like, I don't know that they will. I think it, like, if it was offered to see, like, I don't know. Like, I think it's going to be guys like us and 108 guys and guys that listen to our shows who, like, I don't know. Like, what, and I do think there's going to be, like, enough 2005 stuff that they feed you where it's, like, where everybody's not just, like, pissed off 2 nights in a row. You know what I like? It's a new.
No.
Like, here's your new cool manager, Will Venable. That sounds fun and smart. Like, yeah, the team's gonna be bad, but like, look at all these hires and like, hey, Paul Konerko's here. Like, that's totally what they like wanted. Because even like Kenny used to stand up there and take arrows back in the day. He would take questions from fans and get into it and like this and that, and Rick would just like sit there or whatever. And then your more modern Sox Fest, I left the one in McCormick Place thinking the White Sox were about to go on like a 5-year run of winning AL Central titles. And,
yeah. Well, I mean, that wasn't.
maybe I'm the moron, but like, I mean, that was exciting. Like Michael Kopech was there, and all these kids were coming, and it was like, oh my god, like the White Sox are doing things the right way. Like finally, that obviously did not come to fruition.
Yeah, no. I mean, but nobody saw what happened to the White Sox after that 2020 season. Nobody had any idea that any of that was coming. So, I mean, that's just an unfortunate, weird thing that happened,
Yeah, it was like, what's the monster in Stranger Things? Vecna or no?
Vecna, yeah,
Vecna?
something like that.
Yeah, it's like Tony La Russa is like Vecna ruling over a small Indiana town. Nobody saw that coming, man. Like it's we did not see. Like we did not waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then Bob Nightingale was like, "This is what's going to happen." I was like, "Damn it!" Like,
yeah. I was going to bring up something else. The one thing that I did also, that I would like to also bring up is that the capacity is going to be a lot smaller than a place like McCormick Place or even the
Palmer House Hilton, yeah,
the Palmer House, yeah. And I do think that even with the reduced capacity, I do feel like people would show up and be negative. I mean, I think that it would be folly to undersell the amount of anger and vitriol that is out there right now for White Sox brass. People are still mad at Chris Getz, regardless of who he hired for the manager this time, regardless of the changes they've made. People are still going to go there and try and stab him with the pitchfork.
I mean, do you think people that weren't willing to spend $60 to go to a game though would spend $60 to go there to potentially wait in line and ask like one mean question? I don't know. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, at the Ramova, possibly not. I think at one of the other places they might.
Sure.
They might.
Yeah, one of the other places for sure. But you're right about this is how they're controlling the message, is having it where they're having it.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and move to some of these statements in here and some of these questions in here before see what these guys come up with. Jack says, I hate how much this organization talks about 05. How about another ring instead of remembering 20 years ago?
Well, I mean, that. What we should talk about is at some point is the first half of 06, because that team was awesome. Like
it was fun.
And they won 90 and sputtered down the stretch because the pitching died, but man, was that team fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard I've seen people complain about the Rowan Tomey thing where
that trade was awesome.
I don't personally have a problem with that. I mean, obviously, you just can't expect the pitching to do the exact same thing a couple years in a row. I mean, what they did was special. So,
yeah, I mean, what were they at the All-Star break? Like Ozzie was managing the All-Star game and had like 7 dudes, and they were awesome. And then they just, they just sputtered down the stretch. Burley and Contreras, man, were just done.
Yep, there's nothing you could do about that, I mean, other than possibly replenishing a little bit. Vince says it's sad, Jack, akin to how much we still talk about the 85 Bears. That was what I was going to mention, is that, you're worried about 05. I mean, people are still talking about the 85 Bears, 40 years later.
Well, but, I mean, it's what? We're 20 years from 05. They haven't won a playoff series since.
It's not good. I definitely agree with you there.
How many playoff games have they won? 2?
See, they won one
against the A's and one against the Astros.
Against the A's. Yeah. Yep.
So we have 2 playoff wins in 20 seasons since the title. Right. Yeah. Sorry, guys.
And Josh brings up, remember the Miguel Cabrera rumors?
Yeah.
I do.
Do you know why that? Do you remember why that trade didn't happen?
I forget. Yeah, I knew it was something along those lines.
We didn't want to take on the Dontrelle Willis contract, and the Marlins did.
Yeah, we didn't need him anyway.
I also remember the Torrey Hunter was coming here, and then he signed with the Angels on
Angels,
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
I mean, the Torrey Hunter thing would really shock me if he signed here anyway, because he hated the White Sox so much,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Tampa. They beat Tampa one time in 08. So it's 3 playoff wins.
That is true, Uncle Ted. It should not be underestimated how hard it is to win a World Series.
No, of course not. No.
It is very difficult.
No, but you'd like to be in the playoffs more. That would be good.
Highlight of 06 was AJ's 3-run homer against Dempster with 2 outs in the ninth. That was a good time.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. That season was awesome.
Do you have anything else of any pressing?
Nothing pressing. I do think next Sunday will be fun. Seems like the start of the meetings is always cool. I do think the White Sox will be, involved heavily. What White Sox player do you think we hear the most about next week? Not Garrett Crochet. And it might just be them. And it might just be them pushing nonsense, right? Like, because they've notoriously been good at that. Like, I mean, Robert Benintendi, or is it just one of those things where it's like, hey, teams are interested in Davis Martin of the White Sox? Like, I don't know. But I imagine they're going to be in the news, though.
That was my thinking. Did you happen to catch, just on a quick aside before we head out here, did you happen to catch that article about Davis Martin this week?
I did not. Is it about the kick change and how others are going to do the same thing?
It is about that. Yeah. It was on Twitter. It was from TJ Stats.
You know what? I saw it. I didn't read it though.
Let me see here. Pop it in the, see if I'll pop it in the chat here.
Who did they say just added that? Grant Taylor, right?
I don't know.
Grant Taylor added the kick change, which is frightening, but
that is wonderful. Let me see here. He just posted. It was like a thread in his thing here, and I will go ahead and throw that into the chat. Here it is.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys that are listening know this, but Davis Martin was like Ian's Mason Adams before Mason Adams existed. So
he was.
Just saying.
It is true. It is true. That was my guy that I was watching covertly while everybody else
was good. And nobody knew, and
everybody else was talking about Jason Billis's and Stevers, and I was sitting there watching Davis Martin, and
the stuff
did awesome.
The stuff did get better.
It did. It kicked up. Because he could always pitch, but his stuff wasn't this good before. He ticked up like 3 miles an hour over an off season, and then once that happened, it was like
it was like a rocket ship.
Yes, indeed. Let's see. All right, so FutureSox.net. You can find James' new article on the Rule 5 draft, what the White Sox could lose and what they could possibly gain back in that first with that first round or the first overall pick in the Rule 5. You can also find this podcast there. You can find this podcast anywhere you find your podcast. Know that if you are listening in podcast form, we also do this on YouTube and the Purple app, and potentially somewhere else coming up here shortly. We are working through that right now. You can find all of the minor league highlights that you are looking for at FutureSox on X/Twitter. We appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for coming and hanging out in the chat. We appreciate you guys so much. We will be back next week at 8 p.m. on Sunday. My name is Ian Eskridge. He's James Fox at JamesFox917. You guys have a wonderful week, and we will talk to you soon unless something else crazy comes up and we pop up. Can't predict any of that, but we'll see. We thank you guys so much. Have a great night.